Okay, I think we've given it enough time. So let's get started. It's about 12:02. Thanks for those of you that dialed in already. And hello, and thank you for joining Dun & Bradstreet for today's webinar, the best practices in today's fight against fraud. Before we begin, I'd like to introduce myself and today's speakers. I'm Kendra Harding-Smith, Director of Marketing for Dun & Bradstreet Finance Solutions. Our first speaker will be Harry Chopra, Chief Product Officer for Finance and Risk Management of Dun & Bradstreet's Finance Solutions. And also presenting today will be Chao Zhang, Senior Director for Product Management of Finance Solutions at Dun & Bradstreet. A few things I want to go over before we get started. Our presentation is scheduled to run about 45 minutes, and we will allow for about 10 to 15 minutes of Q&A. A few housekeeping items. I know a few of you had asked, will the presentation be emailed or sent out? And the answer is we will be emailing you the recording of today's session, as well as a copy of the presentation. I would say look in your email box in a few days from now, because it does take us a little time to do that compilation, especially the recording. Additionally, all lines will remain muted throughout the duration of today's call. So the way that we will be fielding your questions would be to please enter it in specifically the Q&A box throughout the session. So whenever you have a question, type it into the box, and we will be watching out for those and try to answer as many questions as possible as time permits. So at this point in time, what I'm going to do is turn it over to Harry Chopra to go over what we are going to cover in today's session. Thank you, Harry.
Thank you, Kendra, and welcome to everybody. We really appreciate you giving us your time to talk about this very important subject. And this is a conversation that will also involve all of you, because we have a series of poll questions included in the program. So I think it'll be very good to get your perspective as well. And our agenda is fairly straightforward. I think we're going to spend most of the time speaking about what are the different dimensions of fraud, how do we even define it, and what techniques can we use from an artificial intelligence perspective, and other abilities to mitigate this fraud on a continuous basis, because this seems to be like the biggest growth industry. So with that, I'd like to just give everybody a few statistics on where we're at today. So this seems like the biggest growth industry that is out there. And it seems to me that all businesses are impacted by digital fraud. And given COVID-19, we think that this has become even more prevalent, because we are primarily dealing with digital storefronts, and it gets to be very difficult to actually verify, some of these organizations. And I think before we get into all the different ways of fighting fraud, you really can't sort of fight anything if you don't know what it is and how we define that. So the first question I have for Chao is, how would you define fraud? How would you classify it?
Yeah, absolutely, Harry. So we're putting them into two categories, either what we call first-party fraud or third-party fraud. Let's say I'm from the business and I'm the one committing fraud. That is first party. The industry sometimes calls it also friendly fraud. On the other hand, I'm not from the business and I'm committing fraud by either stealing another business identity or compromising a business account. That is third party. So business misrepresentation on the bottom here, it can really be either. It involves either fabricating, exaggerating, intentionally missing out certain information to gain financial benefits. So for different industries, it could vary a little. So for banks, business identity threat could mean that a fraudster applies for, let's say, a $200,000 commercial loan on behalf of the company. For insurance, it could mean a fake agent sells a commercial insurance policy claiming he represents the insurance broker. But fraud types are very important distinctions, because from here, our fraud prevention strategies will vary, which leads to different data sources and analytics techniques.
So Chao, if I think about, if we think about all of the definitions of fraud, I think the first question I really have at the very core of it, what are, what do you think are, let's call, the firmographic elements that we really need to be concerned about? And if I'm applying for a process to open an account with a business, or become a part of your business ecosystem, how do we look at those things? Can you talk to me about firmographic data to start with as the first foundational element?
Yeah, absolutely. That's absolutely very critical, Harry, because firmographics is just like demographics for individuals, right? Except here we're using it to define, first, really, we need to know which businesses, and then we use it to define certain, business characteristics, such as industry, location, and size. It really goes hand in hand with our live business identity. So most of you are familiar with our DUNS number. We really have over time have developed this coverage of over 440 million DUNS identities in our data cloud. And we start from public data sources such as Secretary of State, tax filing here in the US, goes through a rigorous data governance process to vet multiple sources to make sure the business exists, meets our DUNS criteria, and has no duplicate before we assign a new DUNS. So that's why the first thing when a business or supplier comes to you to do business, we will be able to help you match the business against our live business identity. And from there, we look further into all of the firmographics, the business profile information. So as you can see here on this page, for a low risk profile, we should expect to see a higher level of consistency between what they say versus what the DNB has on record. But for a high risk profile on the right, we may quickly pick up discrepancies here and there. So watch out for even minor discrepancies, which might make them seem typos, like adding an S or INC after their business name. And oftentimes they will also exaggerate certain business information. Say this business might said it began operation in 2015, and from our data, and this is a real live example, the business did not even start until this year. So these are all the things that we're looking out for.
So Cha, what we're basically saying is there needs to be a significant, or the red flags really are the mismatches between the Dun & Bradstreet verified data versus the data that comes in on an application or a data set that comes in when you're going to add a company to an ecosystem. Did I get that right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's absolutely critical. Just the example I just gave, right? The business actually didn't start until this year, but it claims it began operation in 2015. And now, to make their story look even more convincing, they will probably need to say their annual employee count is 50 instead of 6, and then sales revenue in 7 figures instead of 5, right? All these efforts to make their business look much more established than they are.
Right. So that kind of brings me to our first poll question. Now we have, north of 400 people on this call. And let's kind of think about this. Like, how would we characterize the maturity of our organization's automation to do firmographic data checks when we onboard a business? So let's take a couple of minutes or so and so forth to give us your view, because what this does for us as a whole community here on this call gives us a view on kind of where we're at in terms of the maturity stages. So I'd appreciate it for all of our participants today could give us their views on this. And we'll make sure we take a minute to collect all the answers. And while we're waiting on this, If I'm not, are we ready to have a view on what the results are? Kendra and team, or we need to wait another minute or so? Here we are. So it's pretty evenly split, actually. You can see, considering automation, some of the concept of automation is new for firmographics, and then there's obviously a population of teams that really are either fully automated or they're in the middle of an implementation. So it's a really broad spectrum, which is great to see. This is terrific. So let's move on to the next idea, which is really about, if I think about these things, what's, clearly, Chao, we talked about this idea of digital identity, just like we talked about firmographics. Tell me, what are the red flags, if you will, when it comes to digital identity?
Yeah, absolutely. So Harry, you also mentioned at the beginning, right now, the business are getting more and more digital. And especially the pandemic has accelerated this entire process. And the online channel is probably the primary channel for many of our customers. So without those in-person or phone interaction, it is really more convenient for fraudsters to hide behind a computer or email. And that's why it's very critical to evaluate the fraud risk based on what email, what domain, phone number,
Chao, can we
device, and IP.
move the slides forward?
Yeah, I'm trying to.
Oh, okay, you're still working on it.
The screen is freezing on me a little bit, so we'll get to it soon. So all of those digital identity information is very important. Let's focus on email and device for a moment. In our experience, email age is a strong indicator. We have seen in real life, an email was established 2 days before it was used for loan transaction. And based on our partner data, 97% emails should already be known to the digital identity network. So among a smaller subset of new emails, we have seen again and again, there is a higher percentage that would involve fraud. And this, with the internet and with the nowadays, it's getting so easy to set up a new email. Let's say the real business domain is abcpizza.com. Instead of so-and-so at abcpizza.com, they might create an email of abcpizzainc@gmail.com. And they're getting very creative. Another example, one of our clients recently came across a fraudster who placed a large order of equipment. Instead of using the real business domain, which should have ended with abcpizza.net, the fraudster used .us.
Okay.
So they're
Chao, just give me 1
creative.
second. If we are not able, let me share my screen if you're not able to do that, so we can have the right screen for our audience.
Sounds good.
Okay, just 1 second. Here we are. I think so. Chao, carry on.
Yeah. Harry, you might want to make the screen a little slightly smaller on this page. Looks like.
Oh. Let's see here. Sorry, guys. Should it be in full screen mode, Lenore? Would that be the right thing to do, or let's put that on there?
Yeah, let's try full screen.
Everybody can see my screen, and I will.
Perfect.
It's okay now?
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. Yeah, these were the examples I was giving earlier, right? If you look at the middle graph, and we very much need to know the email age, and then how often it's being used in multiple websites, and also we will be able to see make a comparison and look if there's any discrepancy between the domain they're using versus the domain we have on file for this particular DUNS number. And then device risk is part of this equation as well. If you look at the graph on the left, we are able to help you capture the device unique fingerprint. So a few key considerations here will be, again, how old or how new is this device, how often it's being used, and any reputation associated with this particular device. So let's say if you suddenly see the same device is being used to create multiple accounts within a day, or if this device may have already been reported for fraud, those are all red flags to know for sure.
Right. I think we've got a series of questions that are coming, and we will get to those as we progress this. So Mohammed, I have your question, so I'm not, we'll come back to it. So just bear with us for a second. Yeah. So the second question sort of that kind of leads us to a poll question to say, how would we characterize the maturity of our organization to be able to look at, digital identity, we kind of, let's get the audience to weigh in on and what their views are here, because this is a brand new area, and I think it'd be really interesting to get people's perspectives. And while we're waiting, we are getting lots of questions on email age and how this would work. So we will answer them as we get there. As we get there. So again, a third of the folks are new. The idea is new, and another sort of 20% are looking to do some level of automation, and then you have 16% of folks that are, fully automated, and there's some level of automation underway. So really good sort of mix, if you will. So if we moving right along, Chao, talk to me about transaction history. Tell me a little bit about what does that really mean, and why is it important in the fraud sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think many of you may have already built your own negative list with high risk, suspicious, or confirmed fraud cases over time, and that's absolutely proves to be highly effective to prevent repeat offenders from coming back, right? On top of that, what's the best practice is that you will always want to look any transaction history data from outside of your company, because for fraudster, as soon as they succeed somewhere, they will try to use the same tactics and data elsewhere, because they make all the efforts to make up some of the data, and they have gained success, right? So sometimes that could be within the same line of business. For example, we have seen within the small business lending industry, they might see the attacks coming from the same fraudsters or fraud rings over the same period, right? But we also see that fraudsters can commit fraud across multiple industries, because all they need to figure out is which schemes works where. And that's why we believe in the power of data sharing. And here I'm going to mainly focus on DNB's Business Risk Consortium. Over time, DNB has really taken significant efforts to run and maintain our own data repository on business fraud cases. On average, every year, our certified fraud examiners, they investigate over 27,000 suspicious business, and they are able to confirm close to 80% of them. Why such a high confirmation rate? Because by the time they come to us, usually there are multiple suspicious signals that have already been picked up. So those are highly effective, and those kind of transaction history is absolutely critical. Will help you fight fraud.
And if I think about, transaction history, we talked about digital identity, we talked about firmographic. Does financial data, is that useful in any way, shape, or form as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So we know that for many of you, before you issue credit, you're already checking the company's ability to pay, right? And what's their financial health. For fraud risk, that is also important, especially for first-party type of fraud. Let's say if I'm from the company and I'm the one committing fraud, usually there is a pretty clear financial incentive somewhere, and that's why we need to check if the business is in any kind of financial stress, or over time has the business deteriorated, how credit hungry they are based on recent increase. If the recent average increase are much higher than usual, something to watch out for. And then in addition, if the company has kept a relatively stable credit profile for a while, and then suddenly started making late payments or defaulting on payments, this can also be a result of business identity threat. So that's why those kind of information is important. And then, of course, that doesn't mean a company with high risk financial scores is involving fraud. What we're saying is that a fraudulent transaction is more likely to have such high risk scores at the business level. And then operating status, activity level, and timing business are good indicators as well. Because if you think in a fraudster's shoe, why go through all the efforts to set up a new profile if they could just claim they're from an existing business, especially when the business is not even active, right? So just get a new email, change the phone number, and that gives them a legitimate identity to commit fraud.
So Chao, if I think about this, we kind of covered like 4 major areas, right? Now we talked about firmographics, we talked about digital identity, we covered the transaction history, and here is financial and operating status of these companies. That's a lot of data. Talk to us about like, how have you thought about putting all this together so that, organizations can leverage this content?
Yep, absolutely. So this page is a good summary of all the critical data sources we just spoke about to detect B2B fraud. If you look at the bottom, we really start from this foundational layer to first help you identify which this business is. And then from there, we add the firmographics, digital identity in the middle, and transaction history layers to round out this assessment. And everything is, and if you think about how we're delivering this information, we understand, perhaps from the poll, we saw that some of you have not automated some of these efforts yet. And we understand how challenging it is for you to aggregate from all those different data sources. So that's why we have really taken the effort to deliver all of those contents, all of our comprehensive fraud data dictionary through this single API. And we're leveraging our machine learning capabilities as well. And with the API integration, if Harry, you can go to the next page, we can really integrate this API into your own online systems. And then through this process, we process the data through machine learning, as well as a set of business rules we have developed on the back end. And at the end of this process, you would have a high-level fraud risk assessment result, whether this is high risk or medium to low risk by our 3 machine learning models. And if high risk is identified, what are all of the signals for your further investigation? So that's our methodology, the methodology we have developed in-house.
Right. So one of the questions that came in, one was, can you explain the IP bot data and how it works? And the answer to that question is we have now added digital identity data that is new to the DUNS live business identity. And that is also a feed into the AI models. Am I correct, Chow?
Correct. Those are also the digital identity signals are actually now are coming into our machine learning models. And especially for, if you think about business identity threat type of fraud, we consider these digital signals very important.
And we had another question that came in. It was, you know, how do we sort of think about, you know, notifying organizations when there's a, you know, if we came across identity theft from an organization, how do we send that alert? So how does that work?
Yeah, absolutely. So today, for some of you who are finance analytics clients, whenever we have come across a fraudulent case, and we have taken the effort to investigate into it in our consortium, we actually already have an alert within finance analytics. And we're definitely not stopping our efforts there. And so we're actually actively thinking about how can we take more proactive efforts. And that's on our roadmap to deliver additional alerts to you, for example, based on some of these data element changes. And because those information will be important. Let's say this, just an example, a company suddenly became out of status, or a company financial health has deteriorated significantly, we will leverage some of those change data and develop them through our monitoring system and deliver those to you as alerts as well.
Yeah, I think another question that we'll address in a few minutes is the average company able to determine email age, device age, or device location without a service such as DNB? The answer from my perspective, this is not a very simple thing to do. We've been working on this for a significant amount of time, and you know, we've gotten this there. So this is not simple. Chow, would you like to add anything else to that?
No, you're absolutely right, Harry. You know, even though, so this kind of technology is actually quite unique because you first have to be able to real-time capture the device fingerprint. And then you also need to have a large network so you can kind of determine through the network that, you know, have you seen this email before? Have you seen the device before? And if so, any reputation, negative reputation associated with those data. So, you know, unfortunately, you know, this is not something that can easily be done by a particular, like by one company, and that definitely takes collective efforts to develop these expertise over time.
Right, and more questions are coming in, but let's go to our poll question. And the next sort of poll question that we have really is about, you know, how would we characterize the maturity of our organizations from a machine learning model to identify these three things that we've defined as we started this conversation: first payment default, business identity theft, and business misrepresentation. So let's see if you know what the collective view of the team is all about. So and while we're doing that, Chow, I think we had some experiences that have come in, you know, from certain participants. For example, one of them is in their industry, the buyers or purchasers are the one that place orders with us, and they go to verify the new account. They use contacts, internet address to see if it's a legitimate site, and that is useful to them clearly. And would you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, no, I think that's great, and we definitely think that based on the specific use case, based on the industry, there would definitely be a lot of some of the additional signals that would be highly valuable, especially if you have, in-house data history associated with those data elements. Those will definitely be very effective.
Right. And I think we have the results from our poll. We can see that about 50% of the audience would really like to have a view on how to do this from using machine learning models, because I think, as we all recognize, the amount of data that you have to sift through is very large, and doing it manually is extremely difficult. So the machine learning models, make it really efficient for us to give you a set of signals to do those things. And if I can move my next slide for some reason, here we are. We covered the poll question. So Chao, give us an example of when you put all of these elements together. What can how can you mitigate fraud?
Yeah, this is a real life example based on a recent pilot we ran. So we have a client is from the telecommunications industry, and they are experiencing identity threat, shell company, and first payment type of fraud. So we did a two-part analysis. Part one involves them giving us blind sample without any high-risk data labels. So I think that's that part is important to blind test our model accuracy. And from that sample, we identified 7 high-risk cases, and 6 out of 7 were confirmed by their internal fraud team as high risk. And that was based on their prior manual investigation. Right, so that's part one. Part two involves a larger file analysis with high-risk labels already on file. So from that sample, we were able to capture about 71% fraud with our 3 machine learning models default thresholds, which means that the fraud capture rate can be further improved once we start fine-tuning the thresholds based on additional feedback data from the client. So as you can see from this page, right, and there was a visual presentation on this on the left as well, among the high-risk cases, we're picking up multiple signals from our consortium, digital identities, including email and phone risk, or in some cases, the business cannot be identified and cannot be matched with high confidence. And at the same time, we're also picking up some of the signals in terms of financial stress or open public events such as legal and suits. So I think that's a good example because it really shows why it's important to leverage all of those data sources and then be able to leverage machine learning capability to make an overall assessment.
Thank you. So in order to sort of summarize this, what we're looking at is a brand new service from Dun & Bradstreet. And it has taken us significant time and investment to put this together, where we have connected the live business identity to our digital identity and also to the business risk consortium content sets. And then using that content set, we've put together a series of machine learning models that have a model efficacy of about 83%, which is really good. We've sort of done extensive sort of back tests and data science work associated with that. And then all of that manifests itself in a series of APIs that can be made available to client onboarding applications, so that this is a point in time element that we can easily do that. And I think one of the other questions that have sort of come in is, who do you notify where there's a contact of a spoof domain, and that's one of the things that we do really well with our business risk consortium, because we have a series of certified fraud examiners in our business risk consortium who are keeping track of these things. And one of the reasons why the DUNS Live business identity is unique is we always make sure that, you know, if there's any fraudulent activity against a certain DUNS number, we are able to keep track of those things. So and there's some questions that have come up. Let's go to Q&A. And so one of the first questions that has come up is, what is the cycle time for this fraud analysis? How long does it take to do these things?
So in terms of the
response time of the API. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, the response of the API, it's really we have designed it as a real-time API. So and that means that we can really deliver if you embed this API into, let's say, your onboarding or application platform, you should really be able to see the responses within a very short amount of time. I don't have that exact number, but we have taken significant efforts, and this is based on our D+. If for some of you who are familiar with our D+ access, based on our standard delivery time.
Yeah, no,
right?
it's in seconds as opposed to hours, right? That's what we're trying to say.
That's for sure, yeah.
Yeah, so it's in seconds. We don't actually know what nanoseconds those are, but that's where we're at. I think another question that has come up just recently arrived is, do we check the entity only, or can the company afford the product, such as credit search, and can you match the entity to actual details supplied, and is there a photo ID match option? So so I think on the fraud elements, Chow has already explained to everybody like what we're delivering, and this does not preclude us from doing the credit search and understanding their credit quality of that organization. The photo ID element for an individual kind of then turns into what I call personally identifiable information that gets to be problematic with privacy laws. So right now our business is focused on business fraud as opposed to consumer fraud. So that's the difference here. And the other question that came in, Chow, was, will the email age be provided? Like, so, you know, when we run it against our API sets, are we able to put that together?
Yeah, email age is absolutely one of the signals we have developed, and so you would be able to see to know when has the network first seen this email, and you know, that information is definitely critical.
Another question is that we do have the firmographic data from DNB, but is this a new service or is included? And the answer to that question is that this is a brand new service, because it not only adds a firmographic, but it adds a digital identity and the fraud risk consortium that we run, all of those content sets plus the machine learning algorithms, so that we give you a high confidence to make sure that we're keeping the digital actors at bay that may invade your business ecosystem. Another question that came up was, what is the scope, Chow? Is this US based currently, and and what are we looking at?
Yeah, currently we're launching this in the US. We have already launched in the US, and we do have plans to go global with the solutions, but US is our very first market and very important market.
Right. Another question is, what difficulty do you find with newer, smaller businesses identifying and evaluating them? Is DNB taking any steps to build structure in evaluating these types of businesses? I would say that, you know, the bedrock of what we do is to make sure that we follow our verification processes to ensure that we are delivering to the promise of the live business identity, because everybody in the world relies on the Dun & Bradstreet DUNS number and the live business identity. So we want to make sure that the integrity of that program is sacrosanct, and we're always looking to see how we can do that in a faster cycle time. So that's certainly, we always look at these things. And then on the flip side, we add the fraud elements we just talked about today, and that really helps the whole business ecosystem to do that. So that's the answer to that question. And there's another interesting question, Chow, which is, as a current DNB customer, would we receive any alerts as to a suspected fraud of somebody using my company credentials? Like, so somebody's impersonating a company and trying to take over an account or whatever. Have we kind of thought about that?
Yeah, I see that Kendra said she would like to answer this question live. Actually, I'm happy to answer this one for sure. We as a current DNB customer, we definitely think that if someone is trying to steal your identity, I believe within the consortium, we actually have taken the efforts to notify and also add an alert on your profile. So that's something that we are already doing. And as I mentioned earlier, we also have on the roadmap to develop additional alerting capability regarding business the different type of fraud signals and change of business elements data, so you can take preventative action against fraud.
Right. Kendra, please keep me honest. I think we're at the 12:45 mark or so. And are there anything else that we should be doing here, opening up to more questions, or?
That really is your call, Harry and Chow, if you want to give it another 5 minutes or so, or not sure, what the time constraints are.
Okay. Well, I'm also respectful for the time of our participants, and
exactly.
This has been a really good sort of two-way conversation with so many of you. We certainly appreciate the inputs and great questions. And as Kendra said, the material will be available along with the recording. Kendra, I'm going to turn it over to you for.
Yeah, let me close it out then. Okay. Yeah. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Harry and Chow, for presenting, and thank you everyone for joining today. Really, really appreciate the time you committed to this. As I had noted at the beginning of the webinar, we will be sending out a recording of this session. So please look for an email in your inbox over the next few days. There'll be not only a copy in PDF form of the presentation, but there will also be a link to this recording, so you can again listen through to all the questions and answers. And again, thank you. We look forward to you joining us for future webinars. This won't be the last one for the year, and we hold these regularly and want to keep you in touch with all the product introductions and updates and all the good things that we are introducing into the solutions that we offer you. So thank you. And I wish you all a well and happy day.